Good evening, everybody. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Lou Lemaire, and welcome to the January edition of the Netherlands 2023 study sessions. So what we've got tonight is the theme is Operation Veritable and Blockbuster. So our speakers tonight will be myself and Lieutenant Colonel retired Hugh Jansen, who will give a little bit of an update on how things are going with the planning committee, and myself, I'll give some info on that as well. And following that, we've got Major John Rickard from the Army Staff College in Kingston, who's going to give a presentation that you should be able to see in front of you right now. And as well, we've got some of the participants who are going to be presenting a little piece as well to kind of wrap things up. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to my co-chair of the planning committee, Hugh, for an update on the overall planning session or planning committee sessions.
Thank you, Louis. Again, my name is Hugh Jansen, and I'm also a co-chair of the planning committee. Overall, things are going very well with the tour. All things that have been planned and are planning are on schedule. We're currently full up at 62 seats, 40 sponsored serving members, plus 3 from the command team, including the Colonel Commandant, and 19 veterans, other serving members that are non-sponsored, family and friends. We are still able to sell seats, but unfortunately not at the reduced land rate. It'll be at the full rate, which is about another $1,200, and we can do that almost right up to the day of departure. All pending on room availability at the hotel and seats, of course, on the airlines. Speaking of which, Merit Travel is very busy currently writing up all the e-tickets for everybody. We're going to have people, the sponsored members who are in the greater Petawa area will be provided with transport, as well as we'll have a separate bus from the Ottawa, Kingston, and Trenton corridor traveling to catch the Toronto flights. Most of us will be routed through Toronto. We have about 1 or 2 that will be routed through Vancouver at the same time as the logistics tour will be going through those hubs as well. There'll be quite a few coming from Vancouver and less so coming out of the Toronto. And then we both take the same flights to and from Amsterdam, and but they have a separate tour than what we do, of course. As I sort of pumped out last week, the 16th of January was the last date that any sponsored members could declare whether they wanted to extend their tour at their additional cost. And that has transpired. I have about 4 or 5 names. So if you haven't declared, then you're gonna be scheduled as the normal, the 28th of April to the 7th of May, returning. The jackets have been ordered, and we're discussing internally whether to hand carry them bulk-wise to Europe or mail them out to all the individuals for the sponsored members. So TBD on that. If I'll notify everybody once Merit has all the bookings done, and then they will pump out the e-tickets, and then I'll notify everybody when that will transpire. If should there be any conflicts of what Merit has actually booked and what you think should have been booked, then let us know. Let either myself know or Lieutenant Colonel Louis Lemaire know right away, so we can get that solved. Other than that, we have no holes. We have the budget, we have the money, so everything is going as per schedule. Louis, I'll pass it over to you for the joining instructions and the other item.
Yes, and so So everybody should have received a draft of one of the final drafts of the joining instructions. Those are in with the CNE branch leader. So General Yarker has those for signature. So he's reviewing them, and hopefully we'll get those signed very soon, which will make this whole thing very official. And those will be the expectations. So make sure you have a read of those. Has things that are important, such as the uniforms that we expect you to wear on certain parades, as well as some coordinating instructions. At a later time, I'm going to put out a survey for those who require the busing. We think we have a good idea, but we just want to make sure with everybody that we don't miss you if you're going to be taking the bus that's going to go from Ottawa, stops in Kingston, Trenton, and then taking us to the airport in Toronto. As part of the joining instructions, related, for those of you that are sponsored members, we did kind of put out a policy to the, or we talked about a policy with the branch, and we'd like to see if your unit, like, so there might be operational reason that comes up that you have to pull your name, or something goes on in your family and stuff like that. And those are totally understandable. I've had one such instance already. And what I'd like to see is that you talk to your unit chain of command as well, your CO and your RSM, perhaps, to get a name change. The units have done a huge amount of fundraising to pull this trip off and to send you in some cases. And so if at all possible, there are some exceptions for those of you that are paying, essentially paying your own way. We'll have to come up with something else. So let us know as soon as possible. But for anybody who has to pull out for some reason, we understand totally. What we just ask is that you do your best with your unit so that we can send somebody else, because the price doesn't change. Once we've paid merit travel, which is coming in the next few days, there's no going back. It doesn't, if the tour goes with 55 people, we're still paying essentially the same cost. So all I can say is please help your unit find a replacement, a deserving soldier or aviator that can come with us in the event that there's if an unfortunate incident where you have to pull yourself out. Okay, so that's basically it for myself. I'm going to turn it over now to Major John Rickard, who's going to present on Operation Veritable and Blockbuster. This is a little bit near and dear to my heart, because I once wrote an essay when I was at the military college on Operation Veritable. And I remember getting a very ho-hum review by my professor. So I remembered, if anybody remembers Doug Delaney, I think he ended up being a lieutenant colonel or full colonel. He gave me a very, he said, you can't just say that the Canadians did a good job and that was it. Like, you have to have a real thesis statement and prove it in your essay. So I remember getting a pretty average mark on that one. So I'm sure that John, who's really to me a professional, compared to me, a professional historian, will do a much better job, and then we'll have a good time tonight. So John, please take it away, and we'll take questions. I think at the end we'll turn off the recording. If there's any questions from the audience, we'll deal with that at that time. Thanks very much.
And filling in for Major Rickard, who isn't available tonight, is retired Brigadier General Dave Patterson, who will be our tour master. So over to you, Dave.
I thought John's on the Zoom.
Yeah, John is here.
Oh, okay.
I am here.
My mistake.
Yeah, he made it.
I will back off. Thank you.
That raised my heart rate by a few notches there.
All
Okay.
good.
I'm
Good
sure I can
evening,
bluff my
everyone.
way through this.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the brief this evening. This brief is on Operation Veritable and Blockbuster. And if you don't know much about these operations, this is the largest operation ever commanded by a Canadian, in this case, General Harry Currar, Commander of 1st Canadian Army. And his total resources for this operation in the early part of 1945 approach approximately 450,000 troops, which is slightly bigger than the current size of the Canadian Army. That is in fact Staff College humor. So as we go forward here, I'll give you a brief overview of where we were when we left last time. We had talked about Operation Market Garden. Field Marshal Montgomery's failed attempt to take the bridges at Arnhem. We left you last time up here in the Nijmegen area, with Arnhem just off the top of the screen here. And after that operation ended in failure in late September, the 1st Canadian Army went on to clear the Scheldt estuary in a very important operation. And once that was done and the operation started to stagnate as winter approached, Montgomery had turned his mind to yet another full-scale effort to get across the Rhine. And he had started planning Veritable very early in the fall, actually, in its broad outlines. And he crystallized his plans in late November and early December. And he was ready to go and give the orders to General Carrera to make this happen on 1 January 1945. But something else happened in between. And before we get to that, I'll just give you the lay of the ground so you understand what you're seeing here. So there's the Rhine River. Everyone can follow my mouse. Can't, let me know. This is the area of Operation Veritable and Blockbuster that we will talk about. As you can see, 1st Canadian Army is up here with 2nd British Army under General Dempsey. This is Montgomery's 21st Army Group. There's the Army Group boundary. The Americans are down here to the south. This is General Simpson's 9th Army. Here's the Army Group boundary, actually. General Simpson is under command of 21st Army Group. The Americans are down here. 1st U.S. Army, and of course, Patton's 3rd Army is even further to the south around Metz. This is the area of operations that the 9th U.S. Army will conduct in 1945 around the Ruhr River and northeastward toward the Rhine. Montgomery's basic conception was to clear all the German forces away from the west bank of the Rhine. And that was in line with General Eisenhower's actual policy, the destruction of all German forces west of the Rhine so that they could have an easy time once they got across the Rhine and drove on Berlin. This operation here that you see in green by 9th Army would be called Operation Grenade. And Montgomery wanted the two operations to work and basically were to be executed near simultaneously with only a few days apart. But weather conditions, and especially flooding along the Ruhr River here, consciously by the Germans who would blow dams and dikes, would delay that synchronization and it would not occur. Keep this in mind, the actual launch date was 1 January 1945 for Operation Veritable. This is an actual planning map from the time. I just put this up here to better orient you to the actual ground. Here's Nijmegen. This is where we will spend a lot of our time, one of our bases of operation. Arnhem is up here to the north. Here's the Rhine. Here's the River Maas. Spent the long winter months on waiting for the renewal of operations in early 1945. This hard dotted line here is the border. So here's Holland. This is Germany. This is the famous Reichswald Forest. Here's the famous Hochwald Forest that we will talk about. Here is the town of Xanten. And if you know your Roman history, this was a Roman legionary base. And when the Germans destroyed 3 Roman legions in the Teutoburg Forest in early part of Augustus's reign, those forces tried to retreat back to Xanten, but never got there. They were destroyed before they achieved Xanten. But I digress. Veritable obviously was set for 1 January 45 in Montgomery's mine, but a small operation known as the Battle of the Bulge intervened. You can see up here the Rhine. This is where our area of operations is in early 1945. There's Nijmegen, 1st Canadian Army, 21st Army Group. Army Group B for the Germans pushed through the Ardennes forest, trying to go to Antwerp to split 21st Army Group from 12th Army Group down here. Battle of the Bulge crisis for the Americans lasted from the 16th to the 26th of December, and that's when Patton came up and liberated Bastogne. That's where the 101st Airborne Division was encircled. But the Ardennes operation for the Germans lasted until late January. The Bulge isn't officially closed until the 25th of January 1945. But almost immediately after the Bulge is closed, Montgomery pushes hard to reinvigorate Operation Veritable, and he tells Crerar that his target date is 8 February, and Crerar takes all the necessary steps to make sure that that happens. 1st Canadian Army at this time is a very robust entity, as I described earlier, 450,000. He's got his own 2nd Canadian Corps under General Simmons, but he's also got 1st British Corps and 30 British Corps as well. So it's a very powerful force. And here's our cast of commanders for Operation Veritable and Blockbuster. This is General Chris Volks right here. He commands 4th Canadian Armored Division. He had replaced Harry Foster in command of the division. Volks used to command the 1st Canadian Infantry Division in Italy. There's Harry Crerar, commander of the 1st Canadian Army. Field Marshal Sir Bernard Law Montgomery. This is Brian Horrocks here, commander of 30 Corps, who will start Operation Veritable. Here's Guy Simmons, commander of 2nd Canadian Corps. This is Major General Dan Spry, commanding 3rd Canadian Infantry Division. And this is Major General Bruce Matthews, commanding 2nd Canadian Infantry Division. And he had been promoted to that position from the Chief Artillery position, 2nd Canadian Corps under Simmons. So just to give you some more terrain appreciation, so you understand some of the objectives and some of the hazards and obstacles of the operation. You can see Nijmegen here. This is the Rhine. Here's 30 British Corps. Here's the Reichswald. This line here was basically the extent of phase 1. Crerar had envisioned Veritable as a 3-phase operation. In this first phase, basically clearing the Reichswald was to be executed by Horrocks' 30 Corps. Once that was completed, phase 2 would consist of the capture of these villages, basically creating another advanced line. And for that, Guy Simmons' 2nd Canadian Corps would pass through and assume responsibility for those villages and that line. And in phase 3, 2nd Canadian Corps would exploit, push on, and capture Xanten. All this is designed to secure, take away this withdrawal route, this bridgehead at Wesel for the Germans. This is their basically their last major escape route for their forces all west of the Rhine. So as the Germans get pushed back and retreat, withdraw under contact, this is their main escape route. So the ultimate intent is to take this away from them so they can't use it. So there is a vessel there with the bridge. This is the line that Crerar envisioned 2nd Canadian Corps being, Xanten-Geldern line. Over here on the other side, hopefully that would be the American 9th Army working in cooperation. Put this up here to show you some of the terrain limitations. I think it's safe to say that the conditions under which we fought at this point in the war were far worse than the conditions in Normandy. Normandy was brutal, summer heat, and the German army still in a very powerful position in terms of men and equipment compared to where they are now. But this ground is absolutely brutal. As you can see, the amount of forests, significant tracts of woodland that are manpower intensive to clear. But I draw your attention to the Rhine here, and you can see up here in the legend, these lines here represent the natural flooding due to high water levels in the wintertime. But the crosshatches here, that all represents flooded ground due to breaches blown by the enemy. So these are the conscious destruction by the dikes, by the Germans to flood all this area. So we can't use it. So it's a tactical decision. And that's what it looks like. This is basically the type of, I won't call it ground, the type of water that the 3rd Canadian Division, which will be on the left flank of 30 Corps for the initial phases of Operation Veritable, that's the type of operational conditions they had to fight in. So that's actually a road through the tree line there, but it's obviously not a road anymore. Here's an actual planning map showing the dispositions. Here's Nijmegen for your point of reference. Here's the Rhine. You see where our assembly areas are. 2nd Canadian Army Group, Royal Artillery, all our medium guns. 3rd Canadian Infantry Division, 2nd Canadian Infantry Division, and then the rest of the Agras. This is essentially the front line. This is Groesbeek, and this is the windmill at Groesbeek that was used as an observation tower by everybody from Montgomery downwards, it seems. Visit and use this place to look over the front line. Little boxes represent German defenses, and as you can see, obviously it's a significant defense in depth. And the forest itself is a massive obstacle. And I know you love communications, so this is just a diagram of the main artery communications for Veritable. This is your point of reference from Nijmegen. These other points go way back to the northwest, or the northwest and southwest. Here's Nijmegen, 2nd Canadian Corps planning headquarters right here, and you can see the buried cable coming forward. Then you get into the carrier quad lines. And this right here represents approximately the southeastern edge of the Reichswald forest. So as you clear the forest, starting to use quad cable. And you can see forward, different connections. And these will make more sense when we're on the ground. You'll get an understanding for the actual limitations and operational use of communications on the ground. As you can imagine, given the winter conditions and the incredible dampness, that anything operated by battery suffered significantly, especially the infantry number 18 sets. We're not a very good set to begin with, but this type of weather and dampness really eroded battery efficiency very quickly. So Operation Veritable kicked off on the 8th of February, 1945. Here's Nijmegen. There's the Rhine. You can see all the flooded area. 3rd Canadian Infantry Division, become known as the Water Rats, because they are operating through here with amphibious vehicles as best they can. The thing about Operation Veritable was that for 30 Corps, the fighting had been so intense and so brutal, and the conditions on the ground were so bad that 30 Corps never achieved all of its first phase objectives. particularly Asperden right here was not taken. They did clear a lot of the Reichswald forest itself, but as the days dragged on and the casualties mounted, Crerar decided to commit Simmons' second corps a little bit early and have him take over the securing of the phase 2 objectives. As you can see here, Simmons takes over Horrocks' left flank up here really close to the flooded area of the Rhine on 15 February. And the first phase of Veritable is incomplete. The large town of Gotch is still in German hands, and the Bedburg Gap is still not cleared on the left flank. And these shortcomings in phase 1 prevent proper deployment of General Simmons's divisions, especially the armored divisions. Moylan Wood right here is still not cleared until the 21st of February. So Operation Blockbuster doesn't start until the 26th. So basically from the 15th to the 26th, 2nd Canadian Corps is doing a lot of correcting along the line to get into position to launch its full-scale effort in Blockbuster. So I'll just walk you through General Simmons' scheme of maneuver here so you understand what he's trying to achieve. The British will stay down here on the right flank, and General Simmons' corps will be operating up in this area. Before he even starts, he wants to secure this high ground just south of Kalkar and just north of Udom. This ridge, he wants to get up on this ridge and use that as his launch point for his final drive down toward Zankton. There is 2nd Canadian Division's objective on the high ground, 3rd Canadian Division's objective to the south in phase 1. In phase 2, 3rd Canadian Division and 4th Armored Division have those objectives. Phase 3, 3rd Canadian Division take the town of Udon and finish by securing the spur of the high ground that extends down just north of this village here, Kurvenheim. All that is all subsidiary to the final drive in phase 4 by 4th Armored Division, broken into 2 combat groups, Tiger Group based on 4th Canadian Armored Brigade and Lion Group based on the 10th Canadian Infantry Brigade. Their objective is to secure German defenses immediately in front of the Hockwald Gap, which is right here. And before I go any further, just pay close attention to these lines here, this the blue. That's not water. These are all German defenses. This indicates the strength and depth of the German defenses. So you can see how main belt of German defenses goes right across the western face of the Hockwald. And for his main supply route, Simmons had considered the main roads that were in existence. He considered this one as his MSR, but it was too close to the water. He selected the actual railway as his MSR for the operation, with supplies flowing from Gotch once it was taken. Now, there is some controversy about whether he intended that to be a tactical axis or an administrative axis. But as far as I'm concerned, he considered it an administrative axis, even though there'll be tactical action in here. So as I said, the 2nd Canadian Corps attacked on the 26th of February to start Operation Blockbuster, this final push to Zankton. At the same time, the 9th U.S. Army down here has actually got across the Roar River. The flooding has subsided somewhat. They attacked on the 23rd, but by the 26th, they were closing in and getting close operationally to being able to synchronize some of their operations with 1st Canadian Army coming from the northwest. as I said before, the defenses around these various villages and wood lines were fairly significant, and the Germans fought hard to keep each one of them. And just pay attention here to this one here at Udom when we go to the next slide. This is an actual planning map. You can see the old Scotch tape binding the maps together, the sheets. But there's Udom, and you can see the double line of defenses around that village. Turns out it wasn't as formidable as it looks, and 3rd Division took it in a couple of days. But once that was clear, you can see the Hawkwald here. You can see the Hawkwald Gap, the famous Hawkwald Gap, and you can see the belt of defenses by the Germans all along inside the wood line, right across. There's the railway. This railway goes to Zankton. Sorry. But you can see how formidable, how difficult it is. This is high ground here. So 4th Canadian Armored Division had to come down off the high ground, get through these wooded features, get through the defensive positions, get through there, exploit, come down through another wood, down into the low ground. There's a brook down through here, liable to flooding before they get to Zankt. So there's the railway embankment there. And you can see 2nd Canadian Infantry Division is up here, pushing through the woods. 3rd Division is down here, pushing through the woods to the south of the rail line, through the Tuschenwald, okay, and the Waldberger Wall. And here's what it looks like from Google Earth. Obviously, we've got 3rd Division clearing the woods. Sorry, 3rd Division down here clearing the woods, 2nd Division up here, 4th Canadian Armored Division. Their task is to come through the gap and get to Zankton. Timmins has been heavily criticized for not outflanking all of the Hawkwald forest. He had decided that he was going to make his main effort through here with the Armored Division, hoping that the 43rd Wessex Division that was operating on his left flank would act as a distraction. So it's part of the deception plan for the Germans to think that this is the main axis, shift their forces to block this division, while 4th Armored Division came down off the high ground and punched through, tried to effect a coup de main. That did not happen because this high ground in this narrow corridor became basically a corridor of death. And we sustained very high casualties trying to punch through there. But we ultimately do. This is a sketch of what the Hawkwald Gap looks like with its high point right here. 2 wood lines. There's that railway embankment. And one of our stands will actually be, I think, around the railway embankment, probably back a bit further away from your screen. But you can see the railway cuts through the woods and goes to Zankton. The ground is much worse than it looks in the photograph. And I think you'll discern, especially in the winter conditions and the soggy fields, the difficulty of getting tank support and operating effectively through there. And of course, the infantry have a brutal time trying to clear the woods. But we press on, and by the 10th of March, we have taken Zankton itself, okay? And the Americans are coming up on the right-hand side. That essentially ends Operation Blockbuster for us. We had achieved the objectives set out by Montgomery and General Kerr, but it came at quite a cost. These are the casualties for the 1st Canadian Army, including British casualties from 8 February to 10 March, 5,300. Okay, that's not a lot of time, that's a month. Casualties during Blockbuster itself, primarily from us, sustained by the Canadians, with 43 Division included in there, was 3,640. And if you average that out, we're essentially taking 280 casualties a day in, day out, in that short span of time from the 26th of February to the 10th of March. So over a 13-day span, every single day, we're losing 280 guys, casualties. And at that point, I will open up for questions, leaving you with the final observation that after the west bank of the Rhine is cleared, Montgomery very quickly seizes on the next operations to actually get across the Rhine, and that is Operation Plunder, and then Operation Varsity. Varsity is a massive airborne drop, and I'll leave it at that. You can have any questions now, and just keep in mind that this is a wave top presentation only, and when we get on the ground, you'll be inundated with far greater tactical detail. So thank you for your patience, and I'll take any questions.
Very happy to see that we now have 39 people in the chat and in watching the presentation tonight. There's not too many of us, so if anybody does have any questions, just turn your mic on, or you can type them in the chat. So please go ahead.
John, it's Hugh Jansen here. Can you speak to any air components that come to mind on what factors that or what effect they had in these two operations?
Sure. I didn't want to go into great detail on the air side, but all the resources available were planned for and used. The town of Cleve was bombed into oblivion for the most part. Heavy bombers were used. The medium bombers of number 2 group were used. And of course, the close tactical air support, the Spitfires and Typhoons of 83 and 84 group were used. They were used obviously when the weather allowed, and I didn't go into great detail about the weather patterns in this presentation, but there were a significant number of days where the fighter bombers could not play, but when they could, they were very effective, and the communications system in place with the forward control post, which had replaced the older system of the visual control post, was very effective. And the Germans spoke about it afterwards, the effects of Typhoon striking positions. Obviously, more effective in the open than in the woods. Battle damage assessment in the woods for the air was very difficult, but their post-operation reports for the open areas spoke of significant damage inflicted on German positions.
I had a question on communications. So you showed us the line diagram, and obviously, like, what's your kind of take on, Second World War on the offensive? You're trying to move forward all the time, and so must be quite difficult to establish line communications to your front line, and then have it kind of move backwards to higher headquarters and such. So can you just comment on that at all? Like, how difficult it's obviously, it makes sense to set it up in a defensive if you plan to be there for a long time, but on an offensive, is it more difficult?
It's difficult, and I should probably find some casualty statistics for the linemen in these operations. I will do my best to try to find that for you. But even during offensive operations, the SOP was to push forward line as quickly as possible if it was feasible. So we've got linemen running around trying to do this, basically under fire to get that line forward, at least to brigade headquarters and even further forward. And as the situation ebbs and flows and units become static, the line definitely is attempted to be put in. And when it can't, obviously the wireless becomes the communications of choice. And that becomes very hit and miss. As I said, with the batteries and the atmospherics play absolute havoc with wireless. especially at night. That was a recurring theme throughout all the after action reports, is that the communications architecture degraded significantly at night. So to answer your question, yes, line is used on defensive, and it's more durable than the wireless in many ways, but it is vulnerable to being cut, especially by German mortar fire. This is a recurring theme as well.
Okay, thanks.
So the current swagger of the linemen, linewomen is warranted today?
Well, I think so. I'll try to find you some personal stories of the exploits of some of the linemen, but in Normandy, they were trying to, if you know anything about the Normandy campaign, they were trying to run line right up to the furthest most company headquarters in Operation Spring, for example, in Saint Andre sur Orne and places like that. And it became quite a gauntlet for the linemen. So the infantry weren't the only ones being shot at, that's for sure. Any other questions?
I think that might be it.
We're going to go into great detail when we're over there, and I think you'll really enjoy the stands and the level of detail you will get, and you'll get a greater appreciation when you're actually on the ground looking at the Hochwald Forest and the gap and the Reichswald, about just how brutal the conditions really were.
Yeah, it's hard for us to imagine serving or maybe recently retired members of the CAF to sort of imagine the scale of such an operation with so many Canadians, right? The numbers are sort of staggering for Operation Veritable to have such a huge element under the command of a Canadian in such a conflict. So it's really it was quite surprising for me to do that research paper many years ago, and so I just want to thank you for the presentation.
Sure. I just have one more thing to add.
Oh, of course.
It's just about the point I missed. It's about the whole idea of the criticism of doing the operation the way we did it, right? Why do you have to destroy all the Germans west of the Rhine? Why can't you just outflank the whole thing? Which, as you remember from Market Garden, was Monty's whole idea in the first place, to take Arnhem, cross the Rhine, turn right, and attack the Ruhr industrial region and end the war. Well, Monty is under pressure from Eisenhower. Eisenhower's policy from the earliest days was to destroy German forces west of the Rhine, and that's still direction and guidance for Monty this late in the war. And Simmons rebels a little bit. He actually suggests, he's seeking from Kerr authority to actually push the Canadians north across the Rhine, break out from Nijmegen, and basically get across the Rhine and take the Germans in rear and avoid all that nasty fighting in the woodlands and the flooded areas. But that is, he's overruled on that by Montgomery and Kerr, and they are heavily criticized for that decision. But I don't think in the end Monty wanted to wander too far away from 9th Army to the south. So there are some operational reasons that led to the operation unfolding the way it did.
Okay, very interesting. If I could maybe ask you to close down your presentation, I think we'll get the next one loaded up. I want to say it's somebody from 37 Signal Regiment. If that person is online. And
yes, sir. I'm going to start off the presentation. This is Corporal Kenny.
Awesome.
Can you hear me fine there, sir?
I can hear you. Yes, great.
Perfect.
Okay,
I'm
so
not sure.
introduce yourself and take it away. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you, sir. All right, so this is our presentation on Operation Veritable and Operation Blockbuster, and this was created and is being presented by the Quebec and Maritime Group. So a brief overview of these operations is that This was the first of the Canadian Army's offense in Germany and took place in February of 1945. The attack was launched from the Nijmegen salient into the Rhineland of Germany. The objective was to clear German forces in the area between the Maas and the Rhine rivers. Siegfried Line, the main line of defenses on the German border, was where the attack was to occur. If they crossed this line, it would have been a huge advantage for the Allies. So the execution of these two operations. Operation Veritable was broken down into 3 phases. The efforts to finish the last 2 were called Operation Blockbuster. So in phase 1, the objectives were to clear the Reichswald forest and to secure the line running from the towns of Gennep and Asperdin and up to the city of Cleve. In phase 2, the objectives were to reach the enemy's second defensive system east of the Reichswald and to secure the lines of communication between the city of Emmerich on the east side of the Rhine. In phase 3, the objectives were to break through the Hockwall defense lines and secure the line between the town of Geldern and the city of Xanten. And here we're just found a little graphic showing the advancements of our forces. So you can just have. So a brief little conclusion of the battle is this battle was historically unique with the Canadians, Americans, and British working together, which was militarily successful. According to many veterans from the Battle of Normandy, this battle was the most ferocious and intense of the entire war. And in the end, the Allies were victorious despite their battle with the German defense, the weather, and the high inter-Allied tensions. And now I'm going to pass it off to Colin Winters, which is going to finish off the presentation for us.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, you're all good there.
Okay, so I'll just go through this and present from a more signal-specific viewpoint. Operation Veritable relied heavily on lines, as was previously discussed. Despite advances in wireless technologies, there definitely seems to be a preference for wired communications as much as possible. Of course, the marshy terrain caused by the flooding of the Rhine made that, I can only imagine, extremely difficult in at least some parts of the operation. And we actually used amphibious vehicles to lay these lines. We'll see later how there are some commendations given out afterwards for the difficulty of that task. Signals Corps used over 8,000 miles, 4 different kinds of cables, 151,000 yards of assault cable, and 14 pairs of double armored submarine cables as part of the operation. We can go ahead to the next slide. Now, despite the preference for wired communication and running line, there was the use of wireless. Unlike in Normandy, DRs and liaison officers were used throughout a large majority of Veritable. On the 19th of February, just days after the beginning of the operation, there was a decision made to use typewriters to pass information to observers in the airfields, with an average of 505 messages sent by teleprinter each day. The increase in wireless meant more wireless detachments were needed, and wireless signals detachments were made to keep up with the traffic. Yeah, in the different villages, definitely, taking over of civilian telephone networks, developing test points all over Europe to advance wireless communication abilities. Seems to be kind of a big leap forward in our capacity for the use of wireless. In addition to maintain comms equipment, signalers were in charge of maintaining the signal office, which had 8 divisions, 3 AGRAs, and 4 armored brigades connected wirelessly and by line. That's a pretty big task in of itself, worth highlighting for sure. So there was a line section with over 8,000 connections needed, but due to a variety of factors, shortage of linemen, definitely in the battle group. In one case, Signalman William Codlin was tasked with taking on the job of leading 3 linemen and 5 Dutch technicians. He was awarded with the British Empire Medal for the efforts in doing this work, and showed great devotion and pride for his work. There's a nice write-up there. I'm not going to read it word for word, but definitely you can see a lineman stepping forward and getting awarded for his efforts. Other signalers worth mentioning, Lieutenant A.M. Burslem, attached to the Algonquin Regiment for delivering under fire much needed projector infantry anti-tank bombs to a forward company as a signal officer. He was the guy with the information. He was the only one who knew the exact location of each company. And then Lieutenant W.W. Finley, given the task in a couple of assault boats, essentially several failed attempts to lay some line, but not willing to give up, eventually made it on the final attempt. The 3rd assault boat was successful, remarkably not sustaining any casualties along the way. He received the Military Cross for the efforts there. Then some more signalers received military medal for their efforts. Corporal J. Reiberger, Signalman G.E. Thomas, Sergeant T.W. Bryden, Sergeant A. Pateman, Signalman D. Theriot, and Corporal J. Tomlinson. That's it for the presentation. Now, I did have one question, actually, regarding the use of amphibious vehicles. I mean, obviously, with the amphibious landing in Normandy, it wasn't unheard of for us to be doing amphibious operations, but I think the nature of Veritable really interesting in the way that they had to run line and operate communications sort of sustained over a large area, dealing with those conditions at the same time. Just wondering if you had any comments on that, sir, or any insight to add.
Can I ask our historian to chime in?
Sure, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, the amphibious vehicles are used for many different things. What you just talked about was also attempted and with success in the Scheldt as well, using amphibious vehicles to establish communications across the water area of the Scheldt. So yes, and in this operation, the amphibious vehicles, the Buffaloes are carrying wireless equipment, in line as well, trying to establish cable, depending on how far it was from one high point to the other. And of course, there's different types of cable, land line, and then there's that reinforced cable for the use underwater. So yes, amphibious vehicles were used and contributed significantly to the establishment of communications.
Fantastic question, actually. So thanks for that, and thanks for the great answer. Yeah, I can see in the chat. If you haven't checked it out in a while, General Patterson has put a little bit of extra context there, mentioning the 33 signals that are buried in some of the cemeteries that we're going to be visiting, and that they were very likely linemen. And also a nice note there to note that the military medal, which I think is a British award, and that would be equivalent today to the military, the Medal of Military Valor, the MMV, which has been awarded a couple times recently in modern times, in like the Afghanistan and Iraq conflicts recently. So thanks for that information. That's great. So I'm going to turn off the recording now, and we'll just carry on with like if there's any sort of administrative questions or things like that, and we'll wrap up the presentation. But for tonight, I would like to thank, let me turn my video here. I'd like to thank the presenters. Thank you, Major Rickard, and for those participating tonight in the chat and asking and answering questions. Really appreciate it. Really does feel like I saw some excitement there as well in the chat. And I think it really is getting exciting. We're only a few short months away. We're paying the travel agency, and the flights are going to get booked. Your names are going to you're going to have tickets with your name on them. So this is very exciting. So thank you very much for participating tonight. Before I close off, I'll just mention that the next meeting for an evening session, it looks to be the, as per the plan, is the 15th of February. And the theme for that night is the Hunger Winter and Operation Faust. So that's interesting stuff that we've got coming up next month. So thanks, everybody. And I'll turn off the recording, and we can carry on with sort of off the record questions and admin stuff. Thanks a lot.